Hello, you're on Pablo Spot. I'm George. Welcome to this episode on the series Infrastructure Code for Event-Driven Systems in AWS. And today, I'll be wrapping up this series by showing you how I use GitHub Actions to set up the automated process to build and deploy both my application and Elastic Beanstalk infrastructure. And so if this episode and this channel lines up with your interests, click the subscribe button and join me in this journey of learning by doing. So, let's start coding. This is the same Git repository that I've been working on for this series. And so first things first, I need to make sure that I have the latest code. And then create a new branch for my changes. And as usual, I'll list down all the tasks that I need to accomplish today. So I'll create a temporary file and call it task. For the first task, I need to change the tag that I used to pull out the Docker image for my Elastic Beanstalk Docker configuration file. So what I need is head over to my data.df and set up a data reference block for ECR. The reason for using image tag latest in this block is that when I run my integration process, every Docker image pushed to ECR will be tagged with latest and a unique ID. And this unique ID corresponds to the code changes pushed to the trunk of my repository, which in my case is main. What I will do next is to set local parameters that will interpolate the right image tags for backend and worker service. So I'll head over to my locals.tf. Before I start writing the code that does the actual interpolation of values, I want to go ahead and update the resources that will reference these local parameters. So I'll open my main.tf. And now if I go back to my locals.tf, I will derive the value of the image tag by doing this. What I have here is a try statement. So I'll remove the statement latest in the list of image tags available inside my data reference, and then get the first element in the list. If for some reasons this fails, the value will fall back to the value latest. And now I'll implement the same interpolation on my worker image tag. And so that's the first task done. So let me go ahead and update my task list. I will create a GitHub Actions deployment configuration file just for the application. So I'll create a path in my repository. And then inside this new directory, I'll create a new file called application.yaml. And now I can start setting up the initial configuration entries. The on block indicates that this pipeline runs when changes are pushed to main or when pull requests are created. I also have an initial step that involves checking out of changes from Git using a built-in checkout action. I need the AWS credentials to be able to connect to AWS ECR, and so I add a step to set the credentials using AWS Actions. I will get the values of these parameters from GitHub secrets specific to my repository, so it will look like this. What I need to do next is to set these AWS credentials in my repository in GitHub. So I'll switch to my browser. And on this particular GitHub repository that I'm using for this series, I'll head to Settings, Environments. I'll create a new environment and call it main. And if I scroll down this page, I'll set the values for the secrets for my AWS credentials in here. So now that I have defined the secrets for my environment, I'll switch back to my VS Code. And at the top of the section of my build pipeline, I'll add a block for environment. The next step I need to add in the pipeline is the actual login to ECR using an AWS GitHub action. I will be referencing properties from this particular step, so I need to add an ID property. And then now I need to introduce a new step that will do the actual building of Docker images. I need to run the Docker commands inside the application directory, and so I need to add working directory property for this block. And then I'll add the run property section. I need to integrate the ECR registry string into the tag before pushing the image. So I need to add the step scope environment variable for my ECR registry, and I'll get the value from the previous step. I also need to run my Docker build using concurrency, so I'll add a Docker build kit environment variable. I'm going to add another environment variable for my Docker image tag with the value from the GitHub commit shot. And now I'll update the Docker commands to reference these environment variables. To complete the set of Docker commands that I need to run, I'll add retagging of my image tag with the latest. This pipeline needs to be updated because I also need to build the image for my worker service. So what I'll do is I'll introduce a job matrix. I will define a matrix variable and call it repository with the values backend and worker. And now I can go back to my Docker commands to consume the repository values. I will not be pushing images to ECR on a pull request, and so the final step will involve pushing the Docker images to ECR if the event is a push on the main branch. And that's the application pipeline for building my Docker images. Now let me go back to my task list. Next task is creating security scanning step for my Docker images on the pipeline. So let me go back to my pipeline configuration file. I will add a new step before pushing the Docker image to ECR that will perform the security scan. I have set up the severity threshold for the scan to critical, and I'm also referencing a sneak token secret in here. So I need this defined in my repository in GitHub. So let me switch to my browser. And in settings, secrets, I will set the value for the sneak token in here. So now that my sneak token is set, let me head back to my VS Code. I also want to add a step to push the scan results to GitHub code scanning, so I'm gonna do this. So that's another task done, so let me go back to my task list. The next task is creating the infrastructure pipeline. So inside GitHub workflows, I'm going to create a new file and call it infrastructure.yaml. I am setting my infrastructure pipeline triggers to be based off all pull requests and any push to main, and then an initial step that checks out the code changes. I am using Terraform Cloud as my backend, so I'll add a new step to set up the Terraform Cloud integration. TF token is another secret that needs to be set, so let me switch back to my browser. And then I'm going to click this new repository secret, and then create the secret for my TF token. So see you. So that's my TF token set. So let me switch back to my VS Code. And I'll start setting up steps to a number of Terraform commands that I need to run. I need to run these Terraform commands inside infrastructure directory. So I'll set the default working directory across the board. I need to define an environment variable that will be referenced by these runs. So I need to set tf workspace and set the value to main. Now I can set up the step to run Terraform plan. I need to set the ID property on this step to be able to reference some results on this run at a later stage. I also want the pipeline to continue even on error, so I'll add this. I will need to copy the tf-vars file into an auto tf-vars. This is because the Terraform Cloud integration will not allow for a custom set of Terraform variables. The next step that I'll add involves extracting the output of Terraform plan and attaches this as a comment to the commit. So this is a way for me to see what infrastructure changes are involved in the commit. And then I'll add another step to stop the pipeline process if the Terraform plan process fails. And lastly, add a step to run Terraform apply only when the event is a push and the branch is main. And that's my infrastructure pipeline code. So let me go back to my task list. So I need to set up security scanning on infrastructure code. So let me switch back to my YAML configuration file. So if I scroll all the way to the top of my configuration file, I will add a step after checkout to run my vulnerability scan on my infrastructure code. The pipeline will be reusing the sneak token that I have already set previously, and that's the final step for my infrastructure pipeline. So now if I switch back to my tasks, for this task, I need to switch to my browser and then go to Terraform Cloud. This is the workspace that I've been using for this series. First thing I would do is go to Settings, General, and ensure that the execution mode for this workspace is set to remote. And then, on Settings, Version Control, I need to change this version control settings to API-driven workflow. And then inside variables, I need to get rid of this environment variables map. And then if I scroll further down, I already have environment variables for my AWS credentials set up for this workspace, so no change is required in here. Let me switch back to my VS Code. All that's left now is for me to commit my changes and push to remote repository. Now let me switch to my browser. and then go to GitHub, and then create a pull request for my changes. The Actions tab on this page shows all pipeline runs, so let me open that tab. This page shows that both application and infrastructure deployments failed. The annotation section on this page says line 61, so let me switch to my VS Code, and then go to application YAML file. This looks like it needs S in there, so it says refs heads main, and then this needs to have a double equal sign. Now let me switch back to my GitHub and investigate on the failure from my infrastructure. So the error is on line 25, so let me switch back to my VS Code, go to infrastructure YAML, and this is because it's referencing self instead of secret. Open my terminal, and then commit my changes. So if I switch back to my GitHub, if I click the details link, this brings me to the details of the run. My application deployment failed and it is complaining about the build Docker image step. So let me switch back to my VS Code. So instead of passing -t, I need to be passing -f. It needs to have double colon in it. And then the image tag reference also needs to be updated. And now I'll switch back to GitHub and check my infrastructure deployment. So the annotation is saying that there's an issue at line 75. This one is missing a double equal sign. Save and commit my changes. And now if I switch back to my GitHub, so if I click on details, I can then start watching the progress of my deployment. And it's complaining about the main.tf file not readable. So the step that runs the vulnerability scan doesn't appear to be inheriting the working directory property that I've set up across all steps. So what I'm going to do is, now I'm going to push my changes into my repository. And then I'm going to switch back to my browser, and then click the details and watch the progress of my deployment. So my application deployment failed on the Docker security scan. The two vulnerabilities that are captured by the scan is resolved in using this particular base image. So let me switch back to my VS Code. I need to open my backend and worker Docker configuration files and update the base images. Then I'll open my terminal and commit my changes. Now I'll switch back to my GitHub, open the details of my deployment. So now that all the deployments have completed successfully, let me go back to my pull request and show you something. I have a step that creates a comment that contains what infrastructure changes will be implemented as part of the PR. So this is a comment that is created by the pipeline. And then if I expand this line that says Terraform plan output, it shows me the output of the Terraform plan, which helps me review any changes to my infrastructure as part of the deployment. So at this point, I can now go ahead and squash and merge this change into my repository. This should automatically trigger my deployment. So if I scroll all the way up and then head to Actions, I can see that both my application and infrastructure deployments are running. The application deployment is done, which means the Docker images have been pushed to ECR. So my infrastructure deployment is complete. I'll head over to my backend Swagger endpoint. Then I'm going to test my post and get endpoints. So both my post and get endpoints are running fine. So let me just copy this URL and load it on a new tab. And everything works. That's it. I've finally brought my application from development to deployment, and so that's a wrap for this series. Stay tuned for future series as I continue my quest to explore areas and tools in the DevOps world. In the meantime, let me know your thoughts in the comments below and send me some likes if you find this useful. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like my content and help me spread the word about this channel. Until next time, keep learning and stay safe.